Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
I'm Shannon Penrod.
Hi, Shannon.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm getting there. It's been an interesting day. It's an interesting time we live on.
Yes, isn't it?
Lots going on. We got a great guest who's going to be joining us in just a little while.
Talking about art therapy and autism.
Yeah, and I had mentioned before that so often when we're talking about therapies, and sometimes we talk a lot about ABA here on the show, but I always like to remind people that's not to the exclusion of everything else.
Right.
ABA is about using things that somebody likes to get them to learn other things, and sometimes the arts are in fact the way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That we see that a lot of times young people respond. I just hate it when people go, well, we're only doing ABA, so we're not doing this.
Yes.
And sometimes people will look down their nose at things like equine therapy,
Mm-hmm.
or art therapy or whatever, and I never understand that, because if somebody, look at Wyatt.
I know, my son loves to paint, and we use that in his ABA program.
And it's so reinforcing to him
Right.
that Wyatt gets up every single morning and paints.
That's
he starts
his
his day
that's the first
painting,
thing he does.
and usually when I've seen him, he ends his day
Mm-hmm.
with time. My kid goes and plays video games, but
Right.
your kid sits there and paints and does studies on color,
Mm-hmm.
and says, "Mom, what color is this?" Like, you can't say to me that this is not reinforcing to him, because it's what he chooses on a regular basis.
Yes, and a lot of times his therapist will use drawing at the end of a time period to reinforce.
And some of the different, I think they've gone back to it over and over and over again with Wyatt, because it's the thing that he loves.
Yeah.
Just like with Jem, the computer and doing things on the computer and doing things on a phone became the reinforcer. So
Right.
that if somebody wants to get him to do something, they start a conversation about video games, then they launch into the thing they really want him to do, and then they come back to the video games.
Right.
It's all, because it's the reinforcer.
Yeah.
So
it's not to the exclusion of. That's what you're saying, ABA.
And some young individuals really respond to a horse.
Right.
Like you could say to a kid, like for instance, I've been slouching this whole show, and you could say to a kid, well, we want better posture because it's going to help with the handwriting. So
Right.
sit up straight. Sit up straight. Sit up. We can yank. But if the kid likes horses and you get a kid on a horse, they have to sit up or they're going to fall off. And suddenly the kid is working on core strength, and you're not this, but it's happening. Plus which they're learning a whole bunch of other stuff. And I just, it makes me nuts when people think that that's like somehow antithetical to ABA.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't at all.
Right. Very much can fit in a program.
Anyway, yes. And we always need to be looking for what do our kids,
reinforcer.
what do they respond to? And I know some of you are going to say, but my kid doesn't respond to anything. But then, it's sort of like when you go to the toy store. And I say this all the time on the show. I would take my kid to Toys R Us, and I'd put him in the cart, not in the basket part. I'd put him in the front part. I'd put him in the back part, and I would start shoveling toys in. And I would tour the whole store and keep throwing toys in. And he would play with one thing for 3 minutes, and then he'd toss it out. I'd take it, put it back on the shelf. And we tried 1 million toys. And the one that he stayed playing with, well, that's the one that I bought.
Mm-hmm.
We used to take my son to, they had, here in Los Angeles, they have orchestral petting zoos. Oh my gosh.
Orchestral.
So you go there and they have all these instruments lined up for kids.
Oh.
And they have one in Pasadena once a month, and the kids get to go, they stand in line a little bit, but they get to go up and they get to play a tuba. And then they get to go play the violin, and then they get to go play the clarinet, and they get to try the instruments.
Mm-hmm.
It's so exciting. Like I get goosebumps thinking about it, because I was like, can I get in line? It's just for kids.
Right.
But to be able to go and try and see if they like it, and they would always have
And is that how Jem learned he liked a certain instrument?
He liked them all. But we loved going there. Once a month they would have this, and we would drive down to Pasadena for it. They would have the petting zoo, and then they would take the kids all upstairs, and there would be some sort of a art program, like it might be dance, it might be storytelling, something. And it was, we loved it when he was little. It was a cultural thing, not for autism. And sometimes we didn't make it through the whole program because he would sensory, let us know this is not happening for me. Sometimes we took therapists, sometimes we didn't. But it's those kinds of things that you look for to say, let's look and see what he's interested in. But what we saw was, boy, he responds to the music.
Yeah.
So, you can't, though they're not everywhere, but, we had that one mom on who that's just her job, that now that she finds things to take her older daughter around to do, and then she takes other kids with her. And where there's a will, there's a way. In any case, we're going to talk about art today.
Yes, we are.
Did I just go off?
That's okay. You just had a little side tangent there, but it was very revealing.
Well, it gets exciting when you start to see weren't you excited the first time you watched Wyatt paint and love it?
Yes, because he loved it so much, and he was so little.
Yeah, it gets really exciting. Jem, in the beginning, the first thing that I saw him be excited about was taking apart the vacuum cleaner, and anytime there was a grate, we would go on a walk, and if there was a grate anywhere, the smallest grate, the biggest grate, and he needed to touch it, feel it, get up close and personal, and I was like, oh, how is this ever going to be functional, right? It bummed me out. Like, I would come home and cry and go, why can't my kid have something? We just talked about this the other day, that Christina Adams, her son was into airplanes,
right? So
she took him to the airport, and I was like, there's no grate factory.
Right.
What am I going to do that he wants to take apart a vacuum cleaner? But I one day left our camera sitting there, and he picked up the camera and he started taking pictures. We have some of the most beautiful pictures of grates you've ever seen. But that taught me he liked to have the camera.
Right.
So then I pointed him in the direction of other things. We have a book that we did of photos that he took, and that helped us to find the next thing.
Right.
And find the next thing. So anyway.
And finding the photography was a big discovery.
It was. And, right now he is taking a photography class in school, and it's just so exciting for me that he's learning Photoshop and all these other things, and how to manipulate a photo, and about f-stop and all that, that stuff. And he's so into it. Because he's always been into photography. But my point is that the grate led to that, which then led to other things. Because in the meantime, he got into computers. So now he's learning how to take an image and use it to create graphics. So maybe he'll be a graphic artist. I don't know, but it did come from the grates.
Right.
So there we have it. Anyway, don't give up.
Building, chaining.
Yeah, and just watching.
Right.
And seeing and knowing that at some point you're going to find something that they're really, really into, and don't be so literal with it. But I remember being so bummed that, oh, my kid's into grates. Yeah, I remember that day when I was like, this is not going to go well. Right. So anyway, all right.
So in the news, we have some good stories. Second City is expanding its comedy classes for teens with autism. So we know the benefits on improv comedy with communication skills. So this is going to be a great thing.
I just love this. We love Second City, and love that they're now creating this whole extra program. Love that Tina Fey, who's been so involved with Night of Too Many Stars, she's an alumna of Second City. So I love they've got such a great history, and that they're adding, expanding its classes and saying
for teenagers with autism.
Just what a great thing. Kudos to Second City. Hope that they make, and then that more programs like that get available in more places. We have programs like that here in Los Angeles.
We have several theater companies. We have the Miracle Project that has an improv.
And we actually, next Thursday, we're having somebody on from Zip Zap Zop in Richmond, here in Los Angeles, that they go into the schools and do these kinds of things. So it can be a school program that you can request that your school do here in Los Angeles. And that they are part of the Spotlight program that we just featured here on the show last week, that are popping up every place. We talked about the Sense program.
Right.
So, these things are coming to more places, and if it isn't where you are yet, ask for it to come. That's the key. So, in any case, years ago, we did a big discussion. There was big in autism news about micro movements.
Yes.
These little tiny movements that they were saying that they could see in individuals with autism, And more research has been done about this. And I'm not sure, we don't have on here where this recent study is from. But I want to say, it's out of Indiana University.
And it was reported in scientific reports.
Oh, there we go. Thank you for finding that for me. But one of the things that this is helpful with is that we want to find out all the different ways that an autism brain works differently from how my brain works or your brain works. And as they're seeing with these micro movements, they happen younger than we thought.
Right.
So maybe this is a key to how we're going to be able to diagnose much earlier.
They found that every person has their own unique movement DNA.
Isn't
And the
that
use of
fascinating?
movement as a biomarker for autism could represent an important leap forward in detection and treatment.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is.
That, I always talk about the fact that Jem regressed into autism. And, some people talk about how they feel like it was overnight. For me, it felt
Right.
like it was a really long period
For
of time.
me too.
But when I talk about, it didn't happen until a certain point because we were progressing normally, but it's possible that if we had known about these micro movements, that we could have caught it before he regressed.
Right. It's a
is what I
biomarker.
hear.
Mhm.
So I just find that fascinating. And then, speaking of biological markers, there's 2,000 newly discovered biological markers that could explain how autism develops.
And these are markers on top of our DNA.
Do you remember when we were saying that they had found 2 DNA markers and it was so big, exciting, and then all of a sudden within a month they found 14, and then there was 119, and now they have found 2,000 new ones. Fascinating. If you want to read more about it, you can go to sciencealert.com, and they have a story about it right now, and read up about biological markers with autism. 2,000. We are getting closer. When we started the show, I said one of the things that I wanted to be a part of, that I want to be alive on this planet, is for when we phenotype autism and are able to say, and I want us to come up with all new words that don't involve autism. That you have red 32A, right? That something that, and maybe red isn't the right thing, because I want it to be something that has no connotation to it already. New words that nobody can be like, well, that means this. Let's make up words. Let's say fluahala, number 32, to describe what you have, and it's these biological markers. It means that you should not eat these things, and you need this much therapy. And by the way, this is found to be most effective with what you have. We're getting there. We're really getting there. The truth is that the Center for Autism and Related Disorders has already identified 7 very specific different types of autism, and that correlate with how a person responds to therapy and the microbiome that's in their gut.
And are they using that to design therapy?
They are. They're using that. They're learning that certain lessons need to be taught in certain order with certain kids.
Okay.
That I find fascinating. And that they get more done. It was the
Right.
thing that I had talked about when it came out on the show, the one that I remember from the talk that I was at, because it's my son, that there are kids who don't do well at catching a ball,
Right.
that don't do well with handwriting, are a little clumsy, don't do good with riding a bike. Like each one of those tasks is harder and harder. And what they've learned is, if your kiddo is having trouble with all those things, go back and work on the catching the ball. The catching the ball gets it done for the other ones. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it is fascinating.
Really amazing stuff. And then our last story, which you found for us.
Stress is higher for parents of girls on the autism spectrum.
And again, that's one of those things where, I love it when they do these studies to show that it's there and it's quantifiable, but don't you just want to go, duh?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why is that it's diagnosed later and sometimes not diagnosed
At all.
at all. So, because girls we don't have the same expectations of girls that we do of boys.
Well, and I think one of the things that we've learned over the years is that because the girls don't I think everybody knows that there's such a high prevalence of boys with autism.
Right.
So we're looking for it in the boys, not looking for it in the girls. Girls tend to be a little bit more social than boys are. So they can skinny pass, but a lot of times we find that the girls, when they are diagnosed, are more severe.
Yes.
They can be.
But they get
Plus,
fewer
which-
services.
Exactly.
And
Less
that's one of the reasons
services.
why the parental stress is so much higher.
Less services, more that they have to fight for, and when there are services available, this is what I hear from every mom of every daughter that has autism, is that, well, I got the services, but I went to drop her off and there's 14 boys and
Right.
just her.
Right.
And I don't feel comfortable with that.
It's difficult.
And to which I go, I can completely understand how that would be. I feel, and everything's tailored to the boys. Oh, well, you know, there's, not to be sexist about it, but, you know, all girls are not going to be interested in robotics and Legos.
Right.
And I appreciate that Legos came out with a whole line of Legos that are more girl accessible. And believe me, I know lots of girls who love Legos in all of the colors that they were originally, but not all girls do.
No.
You know. So anyway,
This study is in the Open Access Journal, Autism Research and Treatment, if families are interested in looking at it.
And in the interim, as we're trying to make things better for moms and dads of girls that are on the spectrum, it does a little bit fall to you that if you are seeing signs, go and get diagnosed. And we know how hard it is, we both know, to be in the room with a pediatrician and have your gut say that something's going on and the pediatrician says no. I know I left many times and went home and went, okay, and didn't fight. And I regret every single minute between when I fought. I don't know, do you? I think back and think, man, I wished I'd gone to another pediatrician.
Oh, yeah.
Wished I'd listened to my gut.
I didn't listen to my gut, and my doctor kept poo-pooing me, and
yeah,
that's just the way it was.
And there's no glory when you finally get the diagnosis
No.
of going back to them and saying, yeah, I was right. My gut was right. It's autism. There's no glory in that whatsoever. There's no, well, none of that. So please learn from
Follow
our
your
past things. Follow your gut. Keep pounding until you find the right person who sees what you see. Yes, we get labeled pains in the neck. I'm comfortable with it now. In any case, so we've got a great guest who's going to be with us, Donna Betts from Art and Autism. And really, she's an associate professor and research director in graduate art therapy program at George Washington University. So we're really excited that she's going to be
She's
joining
going to
us
talk
in just
about
a
art therapy and the impact it's having on autism treatment.
Which, you know, I talked at the beginning about the arts and how important it is to have the arts. So we've been talking a little bit about theater. Now we're going to shift to talk a little bit about art. And I love that. All right, so let's take a break and then let's get her on the Skype. Stick with us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hey, welcome back to Autism Live. We heard you. Everybody wants
macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, but we're gonna make it allergy free. But here's what's the crazy part of this macaroni and cheese. It's actually healthy.
And it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes really good.
That's the most important part.
So we're gonna start, we got our water boiling. There's so many variations on the pasta. We're using today a corn pasta. We can verify with the manufacturer that we have a GMO-free product. So let's go ahead and put that in there.
Ooh,
And if you don't mind, stir that up for me, my friend.
Now it's sticking a little bit to the bottom. Is that okay?
We maybe add a little more high heat oil and spread that around again. One thing you gotta know about gluten-free pasta, if you overcook this, it becomes mush. Let's move this guy over to the other burner so you can see what I'm doing. And now we're gonna start with the old macaroni and cheese sauce. What's great is there's a lot of choices for, you know, different soups. And the way that I look at soups, and again, please follow the recipe on your screen right now. I don't like to measure very often. But what I like to use is a creamy butternut squash soup. So this soup is great because it adds a lot of flavor to the dish, but also gives people another serving of vegetables. With kids, we don't want to over season. Maybe with the adults, we can season some for the kids first, pull it out, serve them, and then add a little more garlic powder or onion powder or other types of things into your dish. So the next most important thing on this recipe is we're going to add in a thickener and the faux cheese. Now some people like their sauce really thick, so you just add in more cornstarch or more arrowroot, so that's not a big deal. How's that doing? You think it's ready?
I think it's done.
Okay, so why don't we switch? I'll take
Okay.
that, you do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to strain this bad boy here. Here, let me turn that off.
Okay.
Or we're going to cause trouble again.
Trouble in Lisa's
Yeah,
kitchen.
no,
That's another show.
don't, yeah, right? So I'm going to go ahead, get this all strained. It's a good consistency. So I'm going to check to make sure our pasta is cooked. So really you just want to make sure, just like any pasta, it's a little bit squeezy, a little bit. Nice. Dude, good job. We're
Hey.
good.
Looks yummy.
So even though the cheese is not totally melted, it's okay, don't panic. What's important is that you're gonna love this recipe once you eat it. What I enjoy most about this recipe is that it smells good, but this stuff
perfect.
is amazing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to serve you some up, and you can maybe blow a little bit on it so you don't burn your mouth. Sorry, I'm once a mom,
I
always
was
a
like,
mom.
just like we tell our kids.
I know, right?
But I can't wait. I'm excited.
So I'm gonna give a shot of this too, but
Oh my gosh, that is so good.
this is the ultimate comfort food. So
Oh, it's so
Isn't
good.
it good?
And I'm not just saying that. It is really good. It literally tastes like something our kids would really like. And that sweetness is really, really, really good.
So the bonus for us is that when we're serving this to our kids, they're actually getting a full serving of vegetables in this. So instead of just eating a bunch of carbs and worthless calories, you're actually getting some good stuff in this. And we'll be back next time. I hope you join us again here on Autism Live. We're really loving the feedback, and if you have additional feedback, here's how you get it to us. You can send it to us via email at autismlive@gmail.com. On Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. And also there's thousands of recipes waiting for you to discover them with pictures and different things on the Taka website. So you can hit Taka on the web, takanow.org, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll get to do this again.
I had so much
Maybe
fun.
we'll have a little wine, but you got to join us next time. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Bye, guys. We're going to keep eating.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy.
We are back with Dr. Donna Betts, who is an associate professor and research director in the graduate art therapy program at George Washington University. She's also the immediate past president of the American Art Therapy Association and formerly served on the board of directors of that, as well as the Art Therapy Credentials Board. So welcome, Dr. Betts, to the show.
Thank you, Shannon and Nancy. I'm glad to be here.
You're coming to us from Washington today?
That's right, in my office at George Washington University Art Therapy Program.
Okay. Let's start with what exactly is art therapy, because some people really just don't know.
Sure. So art therapy is a regulated mental health profession, and it's integrated in the sense that it really, it's a wraparound service for clients, and it's found in a wide range of settings where individuals need any type of support, particularly mental health, as I mentioned, behavioral health. It enriches the lives of individuals, families, and communities through active art making, the creative process, applied psychological theory, and human experience within a psychotherapeutic relationship.
Okay. So it's used to in a variety of fields. Let's talk about art therapy in the autism world. How is it used in the autism world? Or how widespread is it as well?
It's becoming increasingly widespread. It's used in school settings for children with autism. It's used in community settings. It's used also in anywhere really where services that are provided for individuals with autism can be found of a range of ages. And you know, because there is an increasing awareness of the need for services not just for children and adolescents, but also, you know, as folks age out of high school and enter early adulthood. So that's another target area. Those folks, of course, need support as well, right into adulthood and beyond, and so do the families. And so art therapists are often working in those contexts as well.
So maybe if you could help us to understand, what does a typical session look like? How does it look different than an art class, and how does it look different than a psychotherapy session?
Right. And so, one of the unique aspects of being an art therapist working with individuals with autism is that we are trained to work with individuals of a range of abilities. I want to emphasize abilities because as art therapists, mental health professionals, we recognize that everyone has the capacity for creativity. We also recognize that, someone on the autism spectrum is going to be very different from anyone else on the autism spectrum, so that, in other words, they're very unique. Every individual is very unique. So the art therapist is trained to learn how to tailor their treatment goals to that individual's needs. And, I worked with people with autism for a number of years. And, the kids I worked with range in age from, I'd say, 8 all the way up to 18. And every single one of them was very different. And because I had such exceptional training at the George Washington University program, the graduate level, and became a qualified art therapist, of course, I was able to, tailor the individual education program goals for each student I work with. I had students that, for example, although they had autism, were actually quite gifted intellectually in some areas and needed support in, emotional regulation or socialization and so forth. And I also had kids on the autism spectrum who, needed more assistance with areas related to intellectual capacity, such as perception, the ability to, improve their academic skills, cognitive skills, and focusing on the area. So again, we really are trained and prepared to work with all the different types of needs that people have.
I'm fascinated. So when you're working on perception, for instance, what might be a thing that you would do with a student to work on that with them?
Right. So again, because art is so unique, obviously, in that we're working with visual skills as well as sensory, tactile, kinesthetic. For example, I also just want to give a nod to some of my colleagues in the other creative art therapy professions. So we have art therapy, which is a distinct profession that incorporates art materials like painting, drawing, and clay, mixed media. And then we have music therapists who, of course, are experts and professionals working and also with people with autism, but with their specialization in music. And they often work on, with speech language related goals as one example. We also have dance movement therapists who be able to work with a child or an adolescent or adult, looking more at the bodily or sensory integration, for example. So we all have our different areas of training. We're all unique professionals. So with art therapists, again, going back to your question about perception. Art making involves a variety of skills. There is, by the way, a lot of research going on right now looking at a very important area, which is neuroscience and art therapy, and what happens in the brain when someone's making art. What's the impact on our feelings? What's the impact on our skills, or especially our in the case of somebody with sensory integration issues, for example, their ability to coordinate the muscle control with the cognitive capacity and so forth, and that's where perception also has a role. So it's what you see and how you see it. And there's an artist by the name of Stephen Wiltshire, who is a British man. He's now a man. He was a youth when his famous book came out, which he did a lot of architectural drawings, and he's somebody on the autism spectrum. As an example of someone who, speaking of perception, he would look at a building like the Tower of London, and then he'd be able to just draw it, and it would be a pretty incredible thing to see. I'll have to say that kind of a gift is very rare. We do see, of course, individuals who have exceptional drawing skills, but again, every individual on the autism spectrum is unique, and every single one of them is going to have any number of range of challenges and abilities as well.
Fascinating. How can people get more information if they're interested in what you're talking about? Where should they go?
So I would strongly recommend the only national organization whose mission is to advance the art therapy profession, which of course means as the profession gains recognition, more and more people are aware that there are therapists out there to help. So that would be the American Art Therapy Association. It's arttherapy.org. And on the Art Therapy Association's website, you will find a huge range of resources on actually the work that art therapists do with all the different types of individuals with whom we work. I also would refer people to the Art Therapy Credentials Board website. That's atcb.org. And the ATCB is the organization in the United States that regulates the art therapy profession by offering professional credentials and board certification. So that site also includes a way for people to locate an art therapist and to find out if there's an art therapist in their area who specializes, in this case, for example, with people who have autism.
Wonderful.
We want to hear about some of the case studies that you've experienced with different individuals on the spectrum, but we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk more about that.
Sure.
Stick with
Okay,
us.
thanks.
Inclusion is everything. Feeling like we have a place where we belong, and when I say we, I'm first and foremost a mother of a child on the spectrum and gym owner and now founder of carrying this to families who need it as well.
My son is extremely hyperactive. Getting him to calm down is a very difficult task. So the idea of Rock the Spectrum Gym, where he could just go and run and play and do all these fun things without any kind of worries and just go and bring down that energy, it helps us so much at home. You know, in the home or at school, it's not acceptable, but this is the one place it is acceptable for the child to kind of be themselves and get it all out there and just really just be themselves.
It's an amazing place where my son could go and be himself. You get to meet other parents who are in the same journey as you are.
I think the most popular aspect of it is how they include all children of all types, not just only learning disabled, lower functioning, moderate functioning, high functioning, and non-disabled.
The people there are so friendly. Everybody's like family. They always greet you with a smile. There's not one negative thing I could say about any of the employees. They're all absolutely amazing. So I think every parent should walk in through those doors and see what an amazing gym it is.
Now a diagnosis being 1 out of 6 kids are in some way or form affected with sensory processing disorder or autism. That's why We Rock Now is on the rise. People want to be a part of it. People know that they have a community there. They know that they can learn more information about things that they don't know themselves or that they can share, build friendships, and basically get what you get in an OT facility, but it's not $150 an hour. It's $12.
And we are back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy.
Our very special guest, Donna Betts, is joining us from Washington, D.C. at George Washington University. She is talking with us about the wonders of art therapy and how viable this kind of therapy is. And so, Donna, we wanted to talk a little bit about, you are very involved in research, and we want to talk a little bit about some of the research and what the results are. How effective is this for individuals who are on the autism spectrum?
So a lot of the research we have is anecdotal. There are some more recent studies that have looked at, sort of interviewed, for example, art therapists who are subject matter experts. There's an article by my colleagues, Teresa Van Lith and Jesse Stallings, for example, who did just that. So there does need to be larger scale, efficacy studies. That's definitely a goal that will take place. And in the meantime, there is a lot of strong, again, anecdotal evidence. So a lot of really strong case studies or smaller scale studies that point to the benefits of art therapy with individuals with autism.
Can you tell us about some of those case studies?
Sure. So I myself have worked with, again, the population as well as conducted some case study research. And what I've found is that, first of all, in working with an individual with autism, of course, the relationship is really essential. So the relationship between the therapist and the client. And partly that's because folks with autism can tend to have treatment goals that relate to socialization. So of course, then the relationship becomes key in terms of not only the therapist as a role model, and also, by the way, when I worked in a school setting, I was very integrated into the treatment team. So I worked every day with the speech language pathologist, with the social worker, with the school psychologist, with the teachers, with the parents. It's really important to have a really good, strong working relationship with the whole team so that everyone's on the same page and the individual's getting the optimal services they need. So again, it comes back to the relationships. So for me, some of the kids I work with also had a difficult background of having been in foster care or having had adverse experiences that caused them to not have a lot of trust for caregivers or teachers or therapists. So trust was one of the goals that we would work on in developing that relationship. So once you have established a trusting relationship with someone with autism as an art therapist or a practitioner of any kind working on a team, that's key. And then you can move forward with some of the essential treatment goals. So, depending on the individual, I would often, for instance, see benefits of the socialization. I would do small groups of art therapy, no more than 3 individuals with autism. I would try to match the individuals on their skill levels so that if, for example, they were working on emotional regulation, we could do some really concrete art therapy-based activities, interventions that would help the 3 of them work together successfully to have positive and corrective emotional experiences, develop trust with one another, and to learn how to communicate effectively through art making in the context of the art therapy session.
Okay. Tell us about family art therapy and its effectiveness.
So that's, again, very important. The families that I worked with were very grateful to have any support they could find to help them, the parents, the siblings too, who are often assisting at home, again, depending on the level of ability of the individual with autism, different levels of support are needed. So, as an art therapist working with the families, there would be a sort of a psychoeducational aspect to it as well, where, for example, I would show the families what kinds of art interventions I was having success with their child in art therapy. And then I would literally teach them how they could try to adopt some of those approaches at home and guide them on what kinds of art materials are appropriate for use with your child outside of the context of art therapy. We as art therapists have to be really cautious about the kinds of materials we offer our patients. So for instance, when we're working with someone with a substance use disorder, you don't offer Sharpie markers. You don't offer permanent markers that could, become an inhalant kind of a thing. So similarly, when we're working with someone with autism, I've had clients that like to put art materials in their mouth. So again, you want to be really careful of what kinds of materials you're giving them. If you give them clay, they may eat it, again, depending on the individual. So the parents would need some guidance around that as well. And then continuity is very important for these individuals, and so and regulation. They like to have things to be predictable in their day and their routine. So I would also talk to the families about, okay, this intervention worked really well in art therapy. Here's how you should implement it at home. Not just in terms of handing. It's not just a matter of handing the child the art materials, but also the space that's needed. The quiet space that's needed for the child to be able to use materials effectively. The support they need. What a parent should or shouldn't say, for example, when they're observing their child making art, and that kind of thing. So a lot of support and the continuity across from the school setting to the family setting.
Okay.
I'm dying to know what the face stimulus assessment is and what you use it for.
Sure. So again, as part of the clinical team where I worked in Washington, D.C. Several years ago with kids with autism, I was required as a clinician to provide, in relation to the IEP meetings and the individual's IEPs, the individual education plans, we'd have to, of course, work with the individual's plans and their treatment goals if they had some. And so I would need to administer art therapy assessments. So this is a way that clinicians would gain sort of a baseline of a sense of what is this person's skill set right now? Like, where are they in terms of their perceptual abilities to draw? How there's a lot of information we can glean from an art therapy assessment, like from a standardized type of drawing. So I tried a few different approaches to this, and I ended up developing an assessment on my own after it took years to develop it. It's still under investigation for validity and reliability and so forth. But my goal was to develop a standardized way to gain a sense of my clients' skills. So, and mostly it was with my clients who were a little bit, who had more challenges cognitively, who, for example, if you just were to give them a piece of paper and a marker, they might just do a scribble. I knew there had to be a way to draw out their strengths. So the face stimulus assessment is a series of drawings that start with an outline and very basic facial features. And by the way, the kids that I had the most success with using the face stimulus assessment were kids who were nonverbal, who had communication difficulties, but in many cases could understand what I was saying, but couldn't speak to me or couldn't articulate their needs. And that becomes an additional challenge for the therapist, because then we have to really find creative ways to communicate and alternative ways to communicate. And art therapy is ideal for that because, again, it's very visually based. I worked very closely with a speech-language pathologist. We had a picture symbols way of communicating as well. We, there were different strategies that we would apply to kind of come at communication from multiple levels. So the child was getting all the different mechanisms for communication. And so the face stimulus assessment enabled me to at least determine a little bit of information about their memory capacity. Were they able to remember where the facial features were located, for example, on the face over several minutes? And then in the IP goals, I could sort of extend that out over time to just to see if the effect would endure, as one example.
Amazing. All of this is just too fascinating.
Yes, it is. It sounds like it's really a burgeoning field.
It really is. It's been around. Art therapy as a distinct profession in the United States has been around for several decades, but there's still could be many more of us. We're really trying to increase the public awareness of art therapy as an option for a career choice. And starting in high school, people should start thinking about, if you're in high school and you're interested in psychology and you're interested in art, you should consider, in undergraduate education, consider taking the psychology and fine arts requirements for the graduate programs, and choosing art therapy as a career. That's what happened to me. I basically, it's the marriage of psychology and art. And those are my two passions when I was doing my undergraduate degree. And then I went ahead and pursued a master's, which is the entry level for the profession. And so, we're trying to really raise awareness of how helpful art therapy is for a wide range of individuals, and get more people to know about it so they can choose it as a career and help more people.
Fabulous. Can you tell us again the websites that you gave us before where we can go to get more information?
Yes. So the American Art Therapy Association, that's arttherapy.org.
Okay.
And we've got that up on the screen. Yep.
Yes. And that site also, if you're interested in pursuing art therapy as a career, you'll find all that information on arttherapy.org. And then for information about how the profession is regulated, that would be the Art Therapy Credentials Board, atcb.org.
And before parents start an art therapy program, they should check there to make sure that the person is properly credentialed, correct?
Exactly. Yes. And that's really important because, because art therapy is not as widespread as we like it to be, it's buyer beware. Whatever state you live in, there are slightly different regulations for the profession. Just be careful that if someone's calling themselves an art therapist, that they are an art therapist. And yes, the ATCB site is a way to verify that. And some states also have an art therapist license, which is an additional layer of protection, if you will, for the public from harm. I mean, if you're going to an art therapist, of course, you want to make sure that person has the actual qualifications so that the treatments that they're using are appropriate and relevant to the individual's needs.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Betts. We've learned a lot about art therapy and autism, and I'm sure there are a lot of families out there interested in exploring this for their kids.
Thank you so much, Shannon and Nancy. It's been my pleasure.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Wonderful. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back to talk about a few things before the end of the show. Stick with us.
Hello, fellow activists. Last week, we talked about step number 1, accept and embrace this challenge. Now we're moving on to step number 2, educate yourself. After my son Wyatt was diagnosed, I put up a sign over my home office that said Autism Central. I went to school in my home office every night after my husband and Wyatt had gone to bed because I was determined to learn everything there was about autism. That's because knowledge is power. Visit all the autism websites you can, read all the books you can, learn about all the organizations that are out there that offer free guides to help you. Some of them even offer mentors to help guide you. Find out about local support services. Find out about what educational services your child is entitled to. Get to every autism conference and seminar you can. I'll never forget the first autism conference that I went to. The first speaker was a beautiful, brilliant woman named Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet. She spoke about a therapy called Applied Behavioral Analysis, or ABA. She told about how it could improve the life of children with autism, and in some cases, recover them. Now, despite the fact that Wyatt had been diagnosed for over a year, nobody had told me about this therapy. I remember calling my husband on the cell phone and saying, "Honey, I met the woman who is going to help improve Wyatt's life." And I'm happy to say that 8 years later, that's true. Are you feeling a little overwhelmed by all the information that's out there? Well, you're not alone. But try different approaches for your child. Trust your gut. Just 40 short years ago, mothers were told if their child had autism that they would have to be institutionalized, and in some cases they were actually blamed for their child's autism for failing to bond with the child. That was called refrigerator mother syndrome. Well, thank goodness times have changed. So until next time, learn everything you can about autism and keep the faith.
Welcome back. Amazing. I love watching you do that, and I love seeing the picture.
I love doing
of your
them.
boys, both your boys. And you just said to me today is the 2-year
Anniversary of my husband's passing.
Can't believe it's been 2 years.
Time has flown by.
Oh my goodness. Also, and to shift gears, and there's no way to easily shift gears, but we've had a lot of questions that have come in a lot of different formats. But one in particular that you said you really, they've been persistent. On YouTube, my brother is 58 years old and was a practicing podiatrist but never passed his residency. He has a degree in biology. He was called special ed in high school at 58. How does he get a certified diagnosis? And, I want to answer that question, but I also want to say for any of the adults that are watching, you can get a diagnosis. You have to go to a licensed psychologist and discuss it with them. Probably the first question that they will ask you is, why do you want a diagnosis? Because keep in mind that if you're having difficulties in your life and you can't achieve the things that you want to, and you feel that it's because a diagnosis is warranted, that there are ways that you can work on it on your own. You don't have to get the diagnosis, and there's pluses and minuses. But even for the parents that write into us about their kids, the reason why we run to get a diagnosis is so we can get funding. And the truth of the matter is that for a 58-year-old, the funding is like non-existent.
It's not going to be there.
So keep that in mind, that if you feel that you need the diagnosis, know why you need the diagnosis, because they're going to ask you why you need it. And it's going to cost you a little bit of money probably. But you can go to a licensed psychologist. I would probably reach out to, see if there's an Autism Society of America that's near you, to see if there's somebody that they know is particularly adept at dealing with adults. The other place that you could go to, and I would recommend anyway for an adult, is go to wrongplanet.net. Alex Plank is the creator. He created that when he was 17 years old, but oh my goodness, it's grown so much. And it is a site that is meant to be specifically for adults that are on the autism spectrum, to be able to share ideas and back and forth. And I think what you'll find, if he says, where he lives and is there a diagnosing professional close by, they'll help to connect him to who is good at that. But if there are things that are in his way that are substantive to him and he cares about and says, I don't know how to do this.
Right.
Like, I just don't know how do you, whatever, fill in the blank. Excuse me, one of the things he can do is go to Skills Living. It's brand new programming that's not just skills, but you can go to skillsforautism.com, or you can call the number 877-975-4559. Ask for Skills Living. Tell them, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I just haven't put it up here yet, there is a discount if you're an Autism Live viewer. So tell them you want the Autism Live discount. I think that the code is ALIVE, but I'm not sure, on the website. But if you call them, say, I want Skills Living, it's a brand new product, but it is lessons from 16 different curricular areas for adults, for older teenagers and for adults. So that a lot of it he's not going to need. But for instance, let's suppose...
Yes, sounds like very high functioning, having been a podiatrist.
Yeah, but suppose that he's having difficulties, remembering information that seems easy for other people, like what his coworkers like to eat, or, those kinds of things. There are very specific sections where he can work through it on his own and get better at it. And in that way, it's driven by him, what's substantive to him, because there are all things that, there are things in there that I could be working on. Some things I don't choose to work on, right? But if we wanted, if you say, oh, well, I want to be better at, staying on top of things. That's always my thing. I'm so bad at executive functions. I can go in and I can work on those things. I just think with adults, it's super important that they say, this is important to me. And this isn't, and you can totally do that with Skills Living. So wrongplanet.net, great place to go and get resources about anything for adults on the autism spectrum. And if you're looking for lessons to do on your own, Skills Living, part of the skills program, phone number 877-975-4559. Tell them Shannon sent you and that you want the Autism Live discount.